Good to be with you. I'm Tony DeCopel. The breaking news right now.
For years, everyone has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but in the end, those are just words if you're not willing to take action when the time comes.
President Trump and the war with Iran, his primetime address to the nation. Just moments ago, what he said about an end date and America's NATO allies. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes standing by.
And liftoff. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Also developing tonight, liftoff for Artemis II, America's first moon mission in more than a half century. What it means for a new era of exploration.
We have a beautiful moonrise. We're headed right at it.
All the memorable moments for astronauts, their goodbyes to family, and the history now coming into focus. What the crew is doing right now. Team coverage from Cape Canaveral. And a surprise at the Supreme Court today, the battle over birthright citizenship comes before the justices. And President Trump himself sits in on the arguments. Tonight, the big questions from the bench and expert analysis from our Jan Crawford. And in New York City, a baby killed by a stray bullet. The search tonight for the suspects who took off on a moped. And a new weapon in the fight against obesity. Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook with everything you need to know. Also, the feel-good tale of a border collie left behind, but not forgotten. And the good stuff tonight, what every successful spaceflight has in common.
Live from America, this is the CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel, reporting tonight from the Kennedy Space Center.
And good evening to our viewers in the West. We're going to get to that historic launch of the Artemis II moon mission in just a moment, but we're going to begin with President Trump's address to the nation just moments ago tonight on the war with Iran. The president said the U.S. military's objectives in Iran are nearing completion, that gas prices were short-term increases in his view, and that the crucial oil shipping lane that Iran has choked off will, in his words, open up naturally. Overall, he said the nation was very close this evening to completing its military objective, but not yet done. Let's get right to Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes with late developments. She was watching along with me. Nancy, good evening.
Good evening, Tony. The president sought to assure Americans that this conflict is actually going to be brief compared to other wars in U.S. history. He insisted that gas prices will go back down quickly, and he claimed that the main cause of high gas prices, the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, is somehow going to resolve itself.
These core strategic objectives are nearing completion.
In his first primetime address since the start of the war, President Trump promised that U.S. military operations in Iran will be over soon.
We are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
With gas prices rising and his poll numbers sinking, Trump also lashed out at NATO for failing to back his war effort. Trump told Reuters today that he is absolutely considering withdrawing from the alliance, which was formed nearly 80 years ago to counter Soviet aggression.
I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war.
European leaders argued today that NATO is a defensive alliance with no role to play in Iran. This is not the first time Trump has done this, a German spokesman said. It is a recurring phenomenon.
We help NATO, but they'll never help us.
Legally, Trump cannot pull out of NATO without an act of Congress. But without help from U.S. allies, it is hard to see how he can stick to his 2 to 3 week withdrawal timeline without triggering a global oil shortage. A wounded Iran has successfully throttled 20% of the world's oil supply by threatening to attack tankers that try to pass through the Strait of Hormuz at the entrance to the Persian Gulf. Australia's Prime Minister warned his citizens today to brace for prolonged high prices.
The economic shocks caused by this war will be with us for months.
Eager to show that an end is in sight, Trump said earlier today that Iran's leader has asked the U.S. for a ceasefire. Iranian officials were quick to call that false and baseless. And interestingly, Tony, President Trump did not repeat his claim in his speech this evening.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're going to turn now to the history that unfolded right here in Florida this evening at the Kennedy Space Center, the start of humanity's return to the moon. It happened with the launch of the most powerful rocket to bring humans into space ever, 4 of them on a mission to ensure NASA's new Orion space capsule can sustain human life. Before traveling around the moon for the first time since the Apollo era, the goal to once again eventually land there on future missions. Today, families gathering to watch the liftoff of Artemis II, the first lunar mission to include a woman, the first to include a person of color as well, and the first in the lifetimes of most people living today. But even in this new era, some familiar pomp, the crew suiting up in the same room as the Apollo and shuttle crews before them, walking through the very same doors to say goodbye to their families before slipping the surly bonds of Earth. Watching it all with us, we're senior national correspondent Mark Strassman and senior space consultant Bill Harwood. They're with me here at the table. Great to be with you this afternoon, this evening, and right now. Mark, let's start with you. What's happening right now, and what happened leading up to right now?
Well, they're working through a couple of issues right now, a couple of hours into flight. But honestly, NASA has to be thrilled with the way this day has gone so far. The launch was just flawless. The 4-member crew is now in high Earth orbit, and they're starting to work through the systems of their new capsule. Remember, this is the first time that people have ever flown inside the Orion capsule into space, and so they're going through a series of systems checks and troubleshooting a couple of issues. About 50 minutes after liftoff, there was a temporary loss of communication with the Orion capsule. That issue is resolved. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman said during a news conference after the launch that it was not considered a major issue. We've also heard that the crew is starting to work with the Orion's toilet. There's some issues there. They expect to work that through, too. But the big issue, the real concern here is the life support systems on the Orion capsule. 90% of that system has never been in space before. That is obviously critical. On the plus side, let's talk about a major milestone that Orion reached, which was the deployment of the 4 solar array wings. Those solar array wings have a wingspan of about 63 feet. They'll provide continuous electrical power to all the systems of the Orion. And without that power, you're not going to the moon. It's just not going to happen. So all things considered, it has gone very well so far. I think, as I said, NASA just has to be really pleased, not just with how spectacular the launch was, but how everything is unfolding.
It's really cool. We're talking about it. We're showing the pictures, Bill. But this launch, it's sort of like the Grand Canyon or the ocean. You can't really fit it in a camera lens. It's too big for that. And the feeling is hard to put into words. What's the significance here?
It really is. I think it was a major step for NASA, no question about it. They have this new revitalized moon program they're trying to execute. They want to get up to launching 2 moon landing missions a year toward the end of the decade, want to build a moon base. But when you look at the challenges ahead, both political, financial, and even technical, it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of, I'll say, luck to make all of that happen.
Yeah. But it happened, and they're on their way tonight. Bill Harwood, Mark Strassman, thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys. All right, we're going to turn now to the historic day at the Supreme Court. It was a big one. The 9 justices heard arguments on one of the most consequential cases of the Trump era. At issue, the president's effort to end birthright citizenship as we know it. President Trump himself was there today in the chamber listening in. That is something no other president has ever done. While outside, protesters called on the court to protect birthright citizenship for future generations. The language of the 14th Amendment has for decades been understood to grant citizenship to virtually everyone born here, even if their parents were here temporarily, even if they were in the country illegally. The president is trying to end that interpretation, and the court must decide who is right. For more on those arguments, let's get to CBS chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford.
The president left the White House with the attorney general for the short ride to the court, taking a seat in the public section of the courtroom minutes before the justices went on the bench. He showed no emotion as the justices expressed skepticism over his executive order that would deny automatic birthright citizenship to babies whose parents are in the country temporarily or illegally. Like in this clash between conservative Chief Justice John Roberts and Trump lawyer John Sauer, who argued the modern-day crisis of illegal immigration called for a different understanding of citizenship.
We're in a new world now.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
The Constitution's 14th Amendment, adopted in 1868 after the Civil War, says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. As Justice Elena Kagan said,
of course, birthright citizenship was the rule, and I think everybody has believed that for a long, long time.
But the Trump administration argues the 14th Amendment was intended to grant citizenship to freed slaves and their descendants, not to the some 250,000 babies born every year to people here illegally. For Connecticut Attorney General William Tong, who has filed a brief in the case, the issue is personal.
My parents were not citizens when I was born. I became an American by right of my birth on American soil.
But the concept of birthright citizenship is novel. The U.S. is one of only 38 countries in the world that grants birthright citizenship to almost everyone. Or, as the president said after he left the courtroom this morning, we're the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship.
Now, Trump has been critical of the justices, especially when they've ruled against him. And based on their questions today, it looks like they're going to rule against him again. We expect a decision in this case by the end of June. Tony?
Jan Crawford for us in Washington. Jan, thank you very much. We turn now to a shooting in New York City that killed a 7-month-old baby. It was a stray bullet that hit the infant, according to police. CBS News investigative correspondent Tom Hansen has the latest.
Tony, good evening to you. Well, NYPD says they are using bloodhounds to try to find one of the suspects who was driving the scooter they believe was involved in the shooting that killed that baby girl. This is a developing story, but here's what we know so far. This surveillance image captures the moment a gunman riding on the back of a scooter in Brooklyn, New York, fired 2 shots, killing a 7-month-old baby who was being pushed in a stroller around 1:15 this afternoon. Now, after hearing the gunshots, police say the child's mother ducked into a nearby bodega where she noticed the little girl bleeding. The little girl's father rushed the child to an area hospital where she was pronounced dead.
Surveillance video shows the suspect driving away, then colliding with a vehicle.
Officials say the suspect on the back of the scooter is believed to be in police custody. The driver is still on the run.
At this time, this shooting is believed to be gang motivated, with the victim being an unintended target, and no gun has yet been recovered.
And Tony, this investigation still very much ongoing. The NYPD also calling on the public to give them any help they can, Tony.
Tom, thank you very much. We're going to turn now to an uneasy moment in the skies. A flight from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Maine, when pilots resorted to manually lowering the gear for an emergency landing in Philadelphia. Manually. What does that even mean? Senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve explains.
Tony, this American Airlines regional jet experienced a hydraulic issue that forced the pilots to divert to Philadelphia. The CRJ-700 uses a hydraulic system to lower its landing gear. If that apparently wasn't working properly, the pilots would have to do that by hand. Take a listen.
Billy approach, Blue Street, 5422, emergency aircraft. We're going to need delayed vectors for manual gear extension. We've got 69 souls on board, and we have about 2 hours and 20 minutes still on board.
So how do you do that? There is a lever in the cockpit central console. The pilot pulls that lever up, which releases the locks, securing the gear. Gravity then pulls them down and into place, allowing for the plane to safely land in Philadelphia.
The safest thing to do is to land the airplane as soon as you can.
Former NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt is a retired 737 captain.
We have redundant systems, so if one of these hydraulic systems fails, there are alternate means to fly the airplane. And I've had to extend the landing gear manually on 3 occasions. You're trained for this in the simulator.
Flight 5422 was coming from Washington, D.C., operated by PSA for American Airlines. American says the plane has been taken out of service to be inspected by its maintenance teams. The passengers were put on another aircraft to Maine. The FAA is now investigating. Tony?
Chris, thank you very much. Still ahead on the broadcast, a new weight loss pill hitting the market. What makes it different? And as we go to break, a live look, the first pictures inside the Orion capsule above Earth. 4 astronauts testing the systems that will allow them to fly beyond the moon. The FDA has approved a new weight loss medication in pill form, potentially expanding access to people who don't like needles, and there are a lot of them. Here is CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook.
The Eli Lilly drug Foundayo is the second oral GLP-1 for weight loss and the first that does not need to be taken on an empty stomach.
So we want to make treatment of obesity as simple and easy for people as possible.
Dr. Daniel Skowronski is the company's chief scientific officer.
It really fits into people's lives in the same way that medicines they take for other conditions on a daily basis could fit in. That's a big advance.
In a large clinical trial, Foundayo lowered body weight from an average of 7.5% at the lowest dose to 11.2% at the highest. Current injectable GLP drugs can lower weight by about 15 to 20%.
Do you think people are going to switch from the injectable format?
There may be some people who don't like taking a weekly injectable, but I think the big opportunity here is to democratize treatment of obesity for more patients, people who haven't had access to the injectable or haven't wanted to be on it, to introduce them to the pill and start them on therapy.
The most common side effects were gastrointestinal. About 10% of those taking the highest dose stopped because of side effects.
Weight loss. For so long,
I felt stuck.
Lilly says it will start shipping Foundayo on April 6th, and pricing will be in line with other GLP-1 options. For people without insurance, the drug cost will start at $149 per month, going as high as $349, depending on dose. For Medicare patients, monthly cost is expected to be $50, and for eligible people with private insurance, as little as $25.
One drawback to the GLP-1 drugs is that people tend to regain weight when they stop the medication. That raises a big question. As we treat millions of people at a cost of billions of dollars, what's the strategy for preventing future generations from becoming obese in the first place? Dr. John LaPook, CBS News, New York.
Up next, the search for Molly, the border collie left behind, not forgotten. It'll be a little longer before Luigi Mangione gets his day in court. Two courts, actually. The 27-year-old accused of shooting and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a Manhattan street back in 2024. His federal trial was pushed to October. His state trial moved from June to September. His lawyers asked for more time to prepare for both trials. And in New Zealand this week, rescuers saved a hiker who had fallen down a 180-foot waterfall, but they couldn't find the hiker's dog. And after 3 tries, they'd run out of money. But donations came pouring in, so they tried one more time, and it worked. They spotted Molly through a thermal camera near the very same waterfall where her owner had been. A rescuer, with the help of a smaller dog, coaxed the border collie into his arms. They have Molly there, a little scruffy, a little hungry, but in surprisingly good condition. And then they got her home. Look at that tail wagging. What a sweet story. Still ahead, the dawn of the age of Artemis. What it took to get us to right now. We are back with the good stuff tonight, and as we think about those 4 astronauts now orbiting the Earth and preparing to begin that next stage, a journey back to the moon, we wanted to end with a few thoughts about what got us to this moment. It's the work of ages, of course, of too many minds to count, but what fuels it all, besides all that liquid hydrogen, is really just 2 simple human virtues. First, curiosity. You can see it in the kids watching today, hoping to see Artemis, and all the kids who came before, hoping to see the space shuttle, and the kids before that, who stayed up for Apollo and for Mercury. Curiosity is what makes some of those kids grow up to be astronauts, including the 4 astronauts up there right now. But it takes more than curiosity to get to the moon. Over the past 60 years, 17 U.S. astronauts have died in the line of duty. And if you think the 4 up there right now haven't considered those risks, listen to what Jeremy Hansen told us just days before liftoff.
I want everyone to understand that you can lose a crew, and if we do, that shouldn't shock us. And the most important thing we do next is we stack the next rocket and we let the next 4 volunteers get on top of it and go.
We stack the next rocket and get the next 4 volunteers on top of it. That is courage. Courage and curiosity. That's how you get to the moon. And that's another day in America. I'm Tony DeCopel, live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We'll see you again tomorrow night from New York. Good night for now.